Thanks. Fire. The end, and I'll explain how we'll do that when we get closer to that time. As I said, Stan Wall can't be here, and what he was going to speak to was how he fits in the role of the LERCON and how the Local Emergency Management Committee works. I'll just ask, everyone can hear me all right? Yeah? Okay, there's a nodded head, so that's good. The Local Emergency Management Committee fits within the framework of the broader Emergency Management New South Wales arrangements. Legislatively bound and directed by the State Emergency and Rescue Management Act, or the SERM Act, which governs and sets out certain responsibilities. It does a lot of things. It sets out responsibilities, it allocates certain powers for people to do certain things, and but most importantly, what it governs is things called combat agencies. And combat agencies are various agencies or government entities that are legislatively bound to deal with certain types of emergency. And in a rural fire situation, obviously it's the Rural Fire Service. In a health pandemic, such as been experienced in the last 12 months, it's the New South Wales Health, although that can change. Obviously for an urban fire, it's Fire and Rescue New South Wales, and so on and so on. For something like equine influenza, it's DPI. So the SERM Act sets those things out. Anything that isn't legislatively set out in that Act is actually the responsibility of police, as are other things such as search and rescue. In setting out those responsibilities, certain powers are established, and they are broad, sweeping powers allocated to combat agencies. And in a significant coordinated response, such as we saw in the fires here about 15 months ago, the combat agency, which was the Rural Fire Service, is supported by the Emergency Management Committee. The Emergency Management Committee is comprised of the LERCON, which is a senior police officer, Limo, as I said, was a civilian employee of the local council. Other emergency service organisations that assist, so your urban fires, your EMBOs, your FCS, VRA, marine rescue, the list goes on and on. The LMC is also supported by functional areas, which are critical to the management of any emergency. They include health, looking after the welfare and health of people who may become ill or at risk. Importantly, the functional area of welfare, which is generally under the auspice of family and community services, and their responsibility is to look after people who are evacuated and people's welfare more generally, psychological counselling and so on. And again, the list goes on. DPI and LLS to look after livestock when they're in crisis. Council and RSPCA to look after companion animals and pets. And the arrangements are broad and vast, and they're too expensive to set out here in any detail. But suffice to say that the backing of the combat agency, and in this case was the RFS, is comprehensive, it is expansive, it involves a lot of staff from a lot of different agencies. And the LEACON, and I'm the LEACON for the Wagga area, has the responsibility of coordinating all of those agencies to support the combat agency. The LEACON themselves has no actual power to direct or command. They operate purely through influence, which is to say to get all those different people from different agencies with different personalities pulling in the same direction is a challenge, and it can only occur if that LEMC operates in a cohesive fashion and collaborative fashion. As I'm sure we're all aware, those things can only be achieved if the people in those committees and in that committee have a degree of respect and trust for one another. And as we know, those things can't be built or manufactured overnight, and which is why having local people who know one another and know the area on those LEMCs is vital. And you're very well served in this district and in this council area by having local people that fit that bill. So those are the broad strokes of how emergency management operates, and they operate that way in regard to any emergency that requires a significant coordinated response. And indeed, the response to COVID-19 in the last 12 months has been managed in much the same way, although methodologies have had to be adapted because of the nature of that issue. There'll be an opportunity to go through some of those, any questions you might have about those arrangements later. As I say, they can be quite detailed, and I can drone on forever about it, but I won't do that to you. So there's an opportunity now to go to Superintendent John Gregory and Peter Jones from the RFS, who've got some information to present to us, and I believe they have a PowerPoint loaded up. So is it okay if I hand over to you two fellows now? John? Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, Black Summer, what can I say? This is not going to be post-mortem or anything about what happened there, but just a few fast facts of what occurred. And I know Tumbarumba was one of many communities that were significantly impacted by Black Summer and the Duns Road and the Green Valley Fire during the 1920 fire season. It created some significant challenges to all of us that were involved in emergency management, even significant challenges to people on the ground. It exceeded, in most cases, our imagination on what the type of fire we faced. A few quick statistics. It was 340,000 square kilometres in our case. It was about almost 1,000 kilometres around the fire. And Peter will give us some more facts and figures on what we had to try and fight that fire. There was about 2,500 kilometres of containment lines and fire trails, which were quite significant. So it's the biggest fire that we've seen. I've been in the RFS for 35 years, never seen anything like it. So what's happened? There was a state inquiry that was initiated by the New South Wales government, and it was conducted independently by an independent former Deputy Commissioner of the New South Wales Police, and there was also a Federal Royal Commission that was conducted by the federal government. And out of both of those inquiries, there's been a number of recommendations. There was the recommendations out of the state inquiry. The New South Wales government has given an undertaking that they'll implement all of the recommendations of those. And with the Federal Royal Commission, the federal government has also made an undertaking that they'll introduce the recommendations of those. So what are we doing? So I'm going to give you a bit of a strategic overview of what we're doing on a district level, and then I'll hand over in a little while to Peter Jones, the district coordinator for Riverina Highlands, and he'll talk about how we can better prepare our properties. One of the big messages that came out of it, and one of the things that we've been very much pushing for quite some time, is everyone needs a plan. It doesn't matter whether you're the RFS, the BFMC, the Bushfire Management Committee, a resident in a town, or actually a resident in the rural. And that was highlighted significantly during the 1920 bushfire season. So what are we actually doing? So some of the things that we're doing at the moment, we've improving the Snowy Valleys Bushfire Management Committee with consultation. So that committee is made up of not only the RFS, it's made up of Snowy Valleys Council, the Forestry Corporation, the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and a number of other stakeholders like Hume Forests and Snowy Hydro and so forth. So we meet quarterly, and we're in the process of developing a new risk plan, which I'll talk a little bit more about. We've also been very busy with our group officers and captains. So we have significant meetings with the captains and the group officers to convey all of the information that's come out of the various inquiries, and they're helping us to implement that on the ground. We've been involved in two cross-border, well, actually three. So two cross-border committees, one with Victoria, and the main reason behind that is to try and get that messaging out there, to get some commonality and try and reduce that confusion that did occur during the 1925s. So we're working with the Upper Murray and also a state cross-border committee as well with that. And we're working also with the ACT government to on a similar arrangement. We're doing a lot of hazard reduction planning. So at the moment, we've got a hazard reduction plan that we implement, and that's being rolled out right as we speak. So we've got a number of hazard reduction burns planned, which I'll cover off on a little further. But hazard reduction and mitigation doesn't only involve lighting the country up. It also involves community protection plans, community engagement, just like what we're doing here now, tonight, and also the hazard mitigation processes. We have fire trail maintenance program. We call it FACT. So there's about $6 million that's been allocated across New South Wales for fire trail upgrades. And we're working at the moment with landholders. So we actually need a landholder agreement with each of the landholders that these fire trails go through before we can actually touch the ground and upgrade those fire trails. So we're working on getting those permissions in place at the moment and the agreements, and we're going to get a nice slice of that $6 million. So we're hoping that we'll get around about $2 million for the Snowy Valleys area for that. So that's a good news story for us. Next slide, thank you. So what have we been doing? All our tankers have been maintained, so that all of them have been through and been maintained, been upgraded, and any problems that have been identified with those are all up and running. We've got $2.5 million that came out of the inquiry and the extra funding to upgrade tankers in the Snowy Valleys area again. So that sounds a lot of money, but when a tanker is worth $400,000 each, it doesn't go very far. So, but we are getting some, and it's the best upgrade of tankers that I've seen in a long time. We've been lucky enough as well to be given a full-time mitigation crew for the Riverina Highlands and Snowy Valleys area. So that there was 100 extra positions identified across the state in the RFS. National Parks and Forestry were also given some funding for theirs, but we were able to employ 100 across the state, and we've been able to secure 4 extra positions here. And those guys, you may have seen them, they're out and about. They've been working up in this area quite a bit recently. They go out and prepare our HR burns, they clear fire trails, they engage with landholders, they do a thing called AIDA, which Peter will talk a little bit more about, which is helping the aged and infirm on their property protection and many other things. We've got 22 tonnes, I should say, of fire retardant located here in the Snowy Valleys. That's the most we've ever had before. So that's a cache here, and many of you have probably heard that there's some upgrading happening at the Tumbarumba Airport and the Tumbarumba RFS base. It's a very strategic facility for fighting fires, and we've been able to enhance that. Further enhancements we're doing at the moment, we're relocating one of our brigade stations to the airport, and some other sealing and works out there to make it a little bit more pleasant to work from that area. And I'd just like to acknowledge that the work that was done out there at the airbase during the fires. It was incredible. Many records of the amount of aircraft rotations and the amount of water that was sent out of there were broken during this fire. And we were lucky enough to have those aviation assets here. We've been able to secure a $50,000 grant to assist council with roadside slashing, and we've been trying to carry that out across the whole of the LGA. And this year, with the La Nina weather, that's been a real challenge, because we've slashed and then we've had to go back and slash again because the amount of fuel that's there. Yeah. So it's been a real challenge. There's probably ongoing media and social media campaigns, and you've probably seen a fair bit of that. We have a Riverina Highlands Facebook page. The RFS has a Facebook page as well. We have a weekly radio segment, Sounds of the Mountains, which we talk about what's happening with fire preparedness and preparations, and many other aspects of the Rural Fire Service. A real good news story for us, we've actually trained 150 new members across the fire district, which is right across the Snowy Valleys Council area. So that goes from Cancoban right out to Tumbarumba over in the east. So down in the Tumbarumba area, there's probably 60 or 70 new firefighters, and that's a real win for us. But there's a big job attached to that, because each of those people have to be prepared with PPE. They have to be trained. Their memberships have to be processed, and then transitioned into the brigade. So that was a real win for us. So I'll just put a picture up there on the PowerPoint. It's probably hard to see from the back, but that's the Werribulda Triggs Comms Tower. So it's one of the main strategic communications towers in Snowy Valleys. And you can see that we've done quite a lot of preparation work with the mitigation crew and pushed out the what we call the APZ, the Asset Protection Zone, around that. So that's one of the real successes that we've been able to achieve in just the recent times. Thank you. And this is a similar one for Mount Ikes. So we've done significant works out of Mount Ikes as well. So the two critical towers. We're also doing work. We're negotiating with the landholders for the comms towers, the Telstra comms towers here behind town. But before we can go in and clear that vegetation, we have to get agreement from the landholders up there, and that's in the final stages at the moment of that happening. So you'll see some fairly significant works being done up there. Thank you. So what else have we been doing in terms of the independent bushfire inquiry? The fires near Muyat, I acknowledge it didn't work as well as it could have been during the last fire season for a number of reasons. One of the things that was identified, it was confusing. So we've adopted the standard icons on there now. So the standard little icons that mean mean various things that are exactly the same right across the whole of the nation now, across Australia. So that's one of the things we've done. Our cross-border warning messaging is now in a standard format. So again, so what we talk about in Victoria is the same messaging that will be given in New South Wales. We're also providing support to the local council, including the LEMO, on what we're doing with our HR programs, our roadside vegetation management strategies, and just engaging a lot more with the local emergency management committee. We're doing bushfire planning protection for roadside infrastructure. Again, we've also got to get that landholder permission before we can actually do too much. EAC availability has been one of the things that was identified in the independent inquiry, evacuation arrangements and vulnerable people support. And I mentioned a little bit about the AIDA program, and Peter will talk more about that. But if there's anyone in your community that you've identified that needs a bit of help, tell us tonight. Tracy down the back in the yellow, she's got some information on that, and we can certainly help out there. Foreground Communications. We've just completely changed all our radio terminals in all our trucks. We've got some terminals in there as well, so that we're entering the 21st century, if you like. So there's push buttons to say when the trucks are responding. The next stage in the near future will be some tablets in the truck, so we'll have real-time mapping in there. So from the Fire Control Centre, we can send out the maps to the trucks, and they've got it on their screen in front of them. And then, of course, preparation and programs like building resilience in the community and in our tourism industry. So what I'll do now, I'll hand over to Peter, and he'll talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of how you get prepared for a bushfire.
Thanks, John. So my role here is to talk about bushfire sense in terms of if we're in fire season. We are still in fire season until the end of the month, and you can pretty much see with this weather, a lot of people are thinking about what am I going to do about preparing my property for fires. Perfect opportunity now and over the winter months to get ready for the next fire season in October. So when that starts, you need to get on top of that now. So I'll just sort of start with a few concepts. My PowerPoint presentation is a little bit fast, so we'll just see how we go. But a well-prepared home can actually survive a bushfire. If you've got a plan, you've maintained your property, there's a good chance you will survive. It's also a shared responsibility. So as a firefighter, we actually will go to a house, and if the house is not prepared, there are times when our firefighters will say, we can't defend this property, we'll move to the next one, particularly in these large-scale incidents. So the landowner must do their part by preparing their property. This is just an example of a well-prepared property. Obviously, you can see they've got a nice asset protection zone around the home, being a grassland issue, but certainly it's quite a nice picture to see that houses can survive fires. So in terms of your decision, in terms of making a bushfire survival plan, there's a couple of things you need to do, and Tracy's got copies of the bushfire survival plan down the back there, but you need to have a bit of a conversation with yourself and your family. So your first decision you need to make is, are you going to stay and defend your home, or are you going to leave and relocate to a safer location? And that's just a decision you have to decide on. Can I stay and defend my home, or am I going to leave when there's a fire? So in order to get to the right answer, you need to have some reasons to come to that decision. So think about your family, your children, your partner and your pets. Can they withstand a bushfire? Are they physically fit and capable and able to defend your home? If the answer is no, the decision is quite simple. Relocate to a safer location and do it well before the fire front arrives. Just got a couple of other photo slides here. Most of these were taken during daylight hours, so you can see how bad the actual images are. That one's obviously not. So if you can actually see the flames embers or spot fires starting around you, then you have no choice. The decision has actually been made for you. You need to defend your family, your property, and seek refuge in the safety of your home as the fire front is passing. This slide's just the next. That one was. This slide here is just about the 3 stages of bushfire impact. I understand you won't be able to see it, but generally homes are affected by bushfire by ember attack, radiant heat, or direct flame impact. Some facts. Riverina Highlands Rural Fire Service, so this is just our Snowy Valley's local government area. We have 28 brigades from Go Cup in the north to Cancoban in the south. We have 75 tankers within our area covering the whole LDLJ. Obviously, we can draw upon other resources from outer areas, but if you think about the time for them to get to the location, can be a bit of a delay. So think about it. How many houses do we actually have in Snowy Valley Shire? And if you think about it, don't expect to get a big red truck at your house because we just don't have enough trucks to go around to every single person's home. We do what we can, but you're asking a lot of all of our volunteers and our trucks to get to every single home. There are times when we just physically can't get to those homes during a fire. Where is it safe? The safest place to be in the event of a fire is nowhere near it. Don't leave it too late. It will be scary. It will be dark when the fire arrives. It will be noisy. It will be hot. If you've made the decision to stay, then don't lose your nerve and leave when the fire is upon you. Take refuge. We've actually had a number of people that have tried to leave when the fire front's hit, and that's the worst time to leave. You actually need to say, I'm going to have to stay here and defend my property or take refuge in my home until the main fire front has passed. If you actually have a look at this photo, this was taken at midday. And you can see there that it's quite horrific. I don't want to bring back too many memories, but certainly you can understand that trying to leave when a fire is at that level can be quite difficult. So your second decision you need to make in developing your bushfire survival plan is your home defendable. So this is what I mean, it's about a shared responsibility. Does your home have a cleared area removed of fine fuels around it? What is it made of and how close is it to the bush? If you've got a very good asset protection zone, you can generally, most houses will survive a bushfire. It's just a bit of a slide shot of things you can do. Obviously you can't see that, but there are copies in the survival plans. Just an example, obviously, of people doing some work around their home. And in terms of the aid program John spoke about, so the aid program is to assist the infirm, the disabled and the elderly residents is a one-off free service which is done by our mitigation crew. They'll go around to people's property once they've registered, assess it, and if it does need to be cleaned up, they can do that one-off clean up for them and then refer them to another non-government organisation to maintain it from that point on. So you can see this photo here is of a house in Talbido. That was actually after the last fire season, and it survived obviously with all that grass in there, but in the gutters, but certainly need to be something to be done about it. So that's just a bit more information. Tracy has a flyer out the back there. If you're aware of someone that needs help, there's the contact details on it with regards to the AIDA program. This is the bushfire survival plan, just a bit of a look, see what it is. So things that you can do now, prepare your home by removing fuels that could easily catch your light from an ember attack, because that's the most reason you'll actually, your house will catch fire as a result of an ember attack. Start work on that now through the winter months, and as we get into October and into summer, you need to have this already done. Have a survival plan, have a survival pack for you and your family, and if you've made your decision as to whether you're going to go or stay, you need to make those decisions based on the weather forecast for the day if there's a fire nearby. Pay attention to your local radio and TV stations. Monitor our website and social media pages on those hot, dry, windy days, and you would have heard on those days when we went into a total fire ban or the like, the severe or catastrophic fire weather days. They're the days you need to put your ears in the air and start thinking about some of those things that you need to do. Am I going to leave? If I am going to leave, I'm going to leave for the the main heat of the day. That might be the option. So the RFS also has a version of this on the RFS website. That's the web address. So you can actually do your plan and have your conversation with your family online, and out of it you can get a result as to what you decide you're going to do and print it up and make sure that the family is aware of what you're intending to do. My family knows what I'm going to do in terms of a bushfire. Just put it up on the fridge once you've printed it out, and certainly it'll give you that information as a ready reckoner. You've had that conversation in a calm, quiet environment, as opposed to when things are going wrong and there's a fire nearby. You really need to have that in a calm manner. Just an example of a survival pack, and this relates to all types of emergencies, not just bushfire, flooding, as we're having up in the north at the moment. Make sure you've got a survival pack, and probably the key piece of information in there is actually having a portable radio. And when I say portable radio, is to listen to radio traffic, to ABC, Sounds of the Mountains, Radio Upper Murray, any of those radio stations. You'll get that information. That's the best way we can get information out quickly. We can do lots of other things, but sometimes systems fail, and the quickest and easiest way is to listen to the radio. If you have to, get into your car, turn on the radio and listen in the car. That's where you'll get some of that information when fires are going. An example of this, just to remember, if a fire can threaten quite suddenly, the first things to fail are generally the phones and the power. So if you haven't got phone or power, there's all your communication started to disappear. So your only option is to really seek that information via internet if you've still got it. If you've got satellite internet, you might be okay until the power battery or your batteries run out. But certainly make sure you've got those other systems and another source of getting that information from somewhere else, not just relying on those one or two things. It's just one of the flyers we have out the back. There's just a bit of information about the emergency warning processes and a few other things, but I've got what's on the next slide. So just when you see this on our Fires Near Me app, or when we're giving messaging about that, so you can see the three new emblems now: the advice, the watch and act, and the emergency warning. That's standardised across Australia now for any type of emergency. The fire obviously has a fire in the icon, but a flood will have a different symbol, but it's basically the same colour. So advice: a fire is burning and not currently posing any threat to any property. A watch and act: a fire is burning and the situation is changing. Enact your survival plan and gain situation awareness. In other words, that's the time if you see a fire that's gone to watch and act and it's near your property, you need to think about, what am I going to do? I need to enact my bushfire survival plan. And then the highest one we have, which is the emergency warning: a fire is burning out of control. Enact your survival plan. Lives and property are under threat. Don't expect that you'll get all of these warnings in order. Sometimes the fires move fast and you may not get in. The first advice you might get might be an emergency warning, or you may get none at all, simply because the fire has moved too fast for us to process that information and get that emergency warning out. This is a revised version of the Fires Near Me. It got updated about 2 months ago. There's a new version of the Fires Near Me with the new icons. There are more improvements going to it. You can actually set your watch zones, and your phone will actually give you notifications of when there's a fire popped up in your area. I'm assuming a few of you have already got this already, but just an example of where it is. So it works on any smart device. Just make sure that you download, set your watch zones and turn your notifications on. This is the federal processes in regards to us alerting people via their mobile phones and their home phones. It's just something that's done at the Rural Fire Service head office. It's just basically the website where it comes from. So you can actually get that warning as a recorded message through your home phone and also through your mobile as a text message. Sometimes that can also be a bit hit and miss if the infrastructure has failed in the meantime. So in terms of the fire danger ratings, so these are things that you need to watch out on a daily basis, particularly during the fire season, obviously. So our fire weather area is actually the Southern Slopes fire weather area. And on a severe, extreme or catastrophic fire day, that will automatically be a total fire ban. So that's the rating has gotten that high. So it's a combination of weather forecast and curing and stuff with regards to the vegetation type as to what type of weather we can expect for the next day. So that comes out about 4 o'clock every afternoon for the next day. Commissioner makes a decision based on the weather forecast for the area, and then you implement either a total fire ban for the next day or for a weekend or the next week if need be. So we normally get those the day before. That's the clock, and you might hear this in Victoria. We call it catastrophic, which is the highest part of the scale. The Victorians call it catastrophic code red. So just in regards to catastrophic, I'm just only going to talk about it specifically because we actually did experience catastrophic fire weather in the 2019-2020 fires, but potentially lives and homes will be lost. So if a fire starts anywhere near you during those conditions, you'll need to immediately relocate to a safer location. Now, the easiest way to do that is if we get forecast a catastrophic fire weather day and your decision is that you're going to leave, the best thing you can do is say, I'm going to leave our area, maybe go to Wagga for the day until the heat of the day. That's what I'm saying. It's a catastrophic fire weather day and you were going to leave, so pack up and move for the day. Come back when the heat of the day has changed and things have gotten better. So firefighters will only be able to assist with property protection, and generally on those conditions will not be able to extinguish the fire until those weather conditions ease, which generally happens later in the evening. We also have the standard emergency warning signal, which is used by TV and radio to warn residents about approaching fires. That has to be authorised to be used. So the instant control of the fire can say we need to use that. We need to use the SUSE message. I don't have an example, but you've probably all heard it before. But I know Dave certainly plays the bushfire siren when there's a message about a fire around. So what can you do now? Prepare and maintain your home. Develop a survival plan. Consider helping the brigade by either joining or providing some support. Just remember, it's your property. It's your fuel that's on the ground, and it's your responsibility to do something about it. This is just our Facebook page. I regularly update this, and certainly not just me, but anytime there's a fire, my first point of call is generally to the radios, ABC of significance, so it'd be either ABC or Sends the Mental Radio Upper Murray, and then put a post straight up on the Facebook page. And that's just where you get a bit more other information. Obviously, the RFS website's the true source of information. They get all our detail from our systems. So what's on the website is generally up to date, the most up to date information we have. If you need more information, Tracy's got plenty of information down the back. The survival plans, a couple of flyers and brochures, and a little Ready Reckoner survival plan checklist. It'll give you some help. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions of Peter and John again shortly. Now, we do have Chris and Marissa on. How are we going to do this, Christian? How's this going to work? Seamlessly. Okay. Enough they can, I assume they can hear me, but we can't hear them yet, so we'll just hang for a second. So we've just got to get up on our screen. So.
screen. So, it is just some of the ways that we provide general flood season and where for a few years. Simple tips for our customers understand how to continuity and redundancy with their technology in certain situations, but remembering there's certainly no silver bullet in extended power. So last season's event, respond with their activities during such an event. So we go to slide 2. Just in terms of mobile phones, portable devices, we always recommend that we invest in an alternative charger, and by that we mean for your car or a GPS device. So if we do lose the power, you've got another option to keep the mobile handset charged. We also recommend that you back up the data to the cloud, so that if you have to leave the premises, you still can access any data or important information remotely. Or you have emergency numbers, obviously, save them on your phone, but also write them down in case they didn't. For areas with little or no mobile coverage, express the line phone. If you're in an area where you've got active mobile signal strength in and around, so consider a extension or try and extend your signal. Which can be used in conjunction with your home broadband. Wi-Fi items to enable Wi-Fi call and SMS on the mobile handset, so that if you do lose coverage, you can still make and receive calls on your mobile through the Wi-Fi component of your home broadband. The other thing is to download the emergency services apps on the pre-order events, so that you've got them ready to go. And you can load them to keep up to date with any important for the service still connected on. Sorry. Set available. Cease to work. Light service, if we've still got power at exchange, your light service will still work. Network hasn't been damaged. So so that you can plug in, well, stay connected. So you can charge but also ensure you're across the sheet. So connection is forgiven. So this will look like new payment systems such as portal. So things that we recommend specifically that customers do get sort of situations. Slide 3. If you the satellite devices that are available with the satellite unit handset. And also a Riverina kit, which is a Wi-Fi that allows up to 5 devices to connect to those simultaneously. Go back through the satellite network. And also look as a community at these, a couple of these centrally located, so that if so that we actually will replicate to slide forward to improve which we connected to improve first ship, an example there. So what you call this ship signal strength and install one so that they have strong mobile signal strength of the ship. So mobile systems can be fitted in vehicles. So it's properly. Slide 5 give you a bit of a threat recovery process in events like three, which is all alternatives media service recovery. So in the midst of the event happening, as soon as it's safe to go into those areas, you immediately use a generator, for example, to restore power. Says don't forget as many services other way as possible and we prioritise instances because they will in terms of generators, we're leading to a fire season or a season stored in. So do so in most seasons cases. Some areas through location, we store a number of generators that we can 3-week horizon. That's all about when it's completed and safe to go in. Deployment infrastructure like cells on mobile, cells on fields, and things like that. Stuff, infrastructure, just infrastructure. Justice. Some exchange buildings. That's just and the if we now go to slide 6, it just gives you a bit of restoration and trying to get services up. So we start with our exchanges. We work with our services organisations. Restore the restoration infrastructure that instances and the exchange and potentially mobile tower that have any form of communication. Then we work through mobile towers at the next step. Because as I said, they become broad services and through smaller exchanges through our and ultimately our fixed lines. If we go to slides, then I think I just wanted to sort of touch on outside of system. So, with Telstra to co-invest considered black spots. It's focused on pilots transport state government about 5 within the snow belt, considered and included sufficient selected on that. So something socioeconomic significant financial contribution themselves and community trust and the submission of the macro. So the outcome still is the decentralized government. So digital is being funded for sales and borrowing. Senators go through that program. So that's also going to participate. So that's all to you guys. We're going to have a microphone. So I'll get you a sec. I'll review. I won't forget. As the questions are asked, I'll just repeat them if you like. So they can be heard firstly by everyone, but secondly by anyone at my screen. So myself and the gentleman from the Bushfire here. I'll answer questions. But questions generally will be for instance, or gentleman friend here with the Chris, I understand the mobile tower system that White's Mountain is installed. Instead of relaying the White's Mountain back to the exchange, the relay is putting back to the Tumbarumba mobile phone tower. So as soon as the Tumbarumba tower went down, White's Mountain tower is also not usable. Are they able to fix that with the link between the White's tower and the exchange? Okay, and Chris, I don't know if you saw the end of the question, the technical challenging for me, but I think it was close to Mountain Tower. Reasonable question. I would say description of how it's all fit. It's an impacted adults. It's a much bigger. The sites have got battery backup to a certain extent, but when you get outages, and because it's on all our facilities. So even if Tumbarumba had stood up, we would have lost the battery reserves in our lights as well. But there are also a couple of occasions where down in Victoria we had because the transmission for our lights comes from Victoria, we had power outages in certain locations that impacted that transmission there as well. So it's just being able to there's no foolproof change in configuration. There's going to be some of the things that we experienced last year. We had something that came out to some challenging and time consuming that's sufficiently addressed question. So, suggestions that the community to discuss. So I can't say that suggestion. See if it's able to be done. The second question, so you're talking about the tablets that we're getting put in the trucks. Is that system is completely separate to the Telstra system? Separate system. It's like transition to the government network. radio systems didn't fire. That was the only radio system that didn't. And we were lucky in that regard. So it doesn't rely on the Telstra system for that. So it's a mixture of satellite technology and also land-based terrestrial technology that's separate to the broadband or the cell phone system. That helps you. Just like the main question in the question would be the first move. I would only apply with a really impacted up there. What would be your first move to identify a black spot, put a bad black spot out that way, all the way down to 2 months, and get action rolling towards getting some communication down that way? So I'm trying, but I'm getting nowhere. And all feedback from entities around this area. So, Chris, can you hear me? So the question was in respect to black spots, specifically around the blade and the tumour, and the gentleman here was a resident in that part of the world. He's asking what to go and sort of check what the outcome is in relation to where we're talking about. I know we're very familiar with the area, but as I said earlier, we're doing the digital connectivity program for a mobile facility in the area. So, property you're enjoying exactly what you're doing. Future rounds of the around 6 and New South Wales program. So it's you just need to keep working through your federal statement. Because obviously they influence in these particular programs. It's like the council showing a number of things, so make sure that that's listed on there as well. And consideration submissions for these programs. Some details we is that happening? Has that been sent? Can you give us a bit of an update?
Certainly I can. I've sent the map of the black spots to Chris, and I've also mentioned to him the Parado, as you mentioned to me. I've sent that all to him at the last Joska RACV. So, yes.
Thank you. Yes, back in Highlands. I'll go out and so I don't think we need to that. He was saying that the words he was saying. I wish I could the answer from the people here online so you can clearly. I don't think we're going to get that tonight, but it's pretty strong. I certainly understand the nature of the agreements. Saying that. Says Rob again.
As we all know, not only in Woodstead, which is going to be now an over 10-year project. The problem is that there were going to be communications as well. There's such a large infrastructure project being done in the area. We're all stuck with communications. Surely there should be some sort of new level of project to resolve that, because we won't understand that now, but as a current work project, but in the future, the project's finished, there's going to be a big experience that we know that someone's going to be in refurb. So surely there can be some new level of project resolving it, especially when some of the federal funding is going to this pathway. Surely it must be priority of the
It probably is, but we've probably just said we're far outside the reason why we're not here tonight. That's a good question. I just wonder how far I want to chase that rather in terms of telecoms down the bar. I'll give Chris an opportunity to address it if you like, but if I understand the question correctly, Rob, it's around this no 2.0 and probably. Okay, right. Well, you know what, I'm actually not going to drop that on. It's about using the AMP for emergency. Yep. Certainly does. I totally agree with you. When we put out an emergency alert, the alert goes out over the various mechanisms, not only the cell phone cell system, it also goes out via ABC, who's our emergency service broadcasting department, and also through the local sounds of the mountains. So all three people probably confirm that for me on the TV. It goes across as a crawler along the bottom, but you have to have TV, you have to have power to see that. The AM 675, Lauren, is it? Is the AM, it still works. It's not very good quality up here in the mountain, but you can use it, and most cars can still pick up AM radio. So I know that was probably a bit of an oversight by many people at the time, and we probably didn't push that as hard as we could have to get that message out. And one of the things that we hear tonight, Lauren's here from ABC Riverina, and she's happy to discuss that as well if anyone wants to talk about that.
Thank you, sir. I have three questions. The first question I'd like to ask, you've raised a comment from the RFS about emergency operations center preparedness and suitability. During the events in Tumbarumba, the emergency operations center located in the council chambers was found to be wanting and not up to scratch to use this emergency operations center. Mainly there were 5 emergency lines that have been removed from that centre for cost-cutting reasons. I think we need to believe what has been done to prepare the Tumbarumba Emergency Operations Centre for suitable use, And if so, if that has not been done, when is it going to be done? And how is it going to be verified when it is?
All right, so we might do that one first, Ken. So it was in respect of Tumbarumba EOC and the lines in and out of that. That's the crux of your question, yeah. Obviously, I'm not in possession of the facts, and I don't know if Matthew is, and we don't have Glenn here, so might be one we take on notice, mate, is it?
It's a secondary centre, and the secondary centre is set up to be able to handle it. There has been changes since. Yep. So,
All right, there have been changes since, Ken. I think we'll just allow Matthew to get that information and get it back at a reasonable time. What was your next question, mate?
Thank you, sir. As you would be aware, being a lead all personnel working emergency operations that have to be emergency management trained. In light of the police keep having alternative leave available during extended periods of operation, does the council have appropriately trained personnel to act as local emergency management officer, and are those personnel delegated, and have they received the appropriate emergency management training to fulfill that role in the absence of the current remote?
Yes, correct. So the question was for those online, do we have an alternative LEMO appropriately trained and ready to step into that role? The answer from Mr. Hyde was in the affirmative, without going into details about that, which I don't think we will, but certainly well served with the personnel that were there at the time, but so we'll just take that one away, Matthew, but yeah. And got another one, mate?
My third question was to RFS. How essential was UHF communications as secondary backup in light of communications with non-RFS personnel and people who had signals? Did you find that useful? Second part of that question was, did the breakdown or lack of availability of the repeater now-lights cause any hardship or undue concern for RFS or other agencies related to it?
Thanks, Ken. So your question in two parts was firstly about the effectiveness otherwise of UHF, and secondly, a peripheral question around the effect of the amount of lights going down. Is that about right?
Well, the non-functioning of the UHF.
No, great question. UHFCB. So what we have three networks that we use. So we have a PMR system, which is our strategic network. Then we have a what we call the Foreground network, which is a tactical network. And then we have a tertiary network, which we use the UHF. So up in the Tumbarumba area, we use 12, 12 and 12. They're all channel 12s on the Foreground. The division commanders on the Foreground can also make a decision that they might need to relocate to another channel on the UHF, or indeed the Foreground if they get too congested. But UHF is an integral part of our operation. All our heavy plant operators use UHF as that platform. The 12 is a simplex, not a repeater channel that you're talking about. You're talking about the channel 3 repeater up on ice. We're aware that that's gone down, and we've been having some discussion with council about the possibility of renewing that, getting it back up and running, and whether some of the brigades want to take that on in custodianship. We don't get directly funded, but if the brigades want to look at that, we have had some discussion about getting that back up. It wouldn't be used as a tactical or a strategic network during firefighting because it's simply on IX, it'll be going down into Victoria. As you know, the Channel 3 goes everywhere, and we would still use UHF just as a simplex. We're working on a formalised farm firefighting strategy to bring the farmers into the fold. But luckily in our area up here, most of the farmers are involved in the RFS anyway, so it's not a big deal. I hope that helps you answer the question.
Yes, sir. Yep. Okay.
Lorraine Wilson, a question for you, John. I'm a little bit disappointed in this evening. There's not a great deal I have learned apart from most of the questions. They have been fantastic. Now, you mentioned the word local in your community, your top-down sort of thing. It's far too top-down. As you can see, the locals have a terrific input to put into it. Where is the local in your local community?
Okay, so before I hand over to John, the question was, and it's a great one, and it's about, I think it's really asking a bit more for a comment, but about how we're involving locals, or how can we involve locals more? Yeah, Ryan, thank you.
Yeah, Lorraine, are you talking about the local emergency management committee or the?
That's what you said it was.
Yeah, okay. Well, local is on local government. It's based on local government districts. There's a couple of gentlemen in this room. In terms of, we have a senior management team in the RFS. So we have 4 representatives who are group officers from Tumbarumba, and we have 4 representatives that are group officers in Sherman. We've got Peter Lonergan down the back here tonight. He's one of the group officers that represents the Tumbarumba area, and we also have the brigade captain. We meet regularly, 2 to 3 times a year with all the captains, formally, and then informally on much more frequent basis to that. Alan French is in the room again tonight, and Alan's the captain of Tumbarumba. We have about 15 brigades in the Tumbarumba area, various from down at Orney right down to Willigabba. They're all engaged and included in the decision making and whatever occurs with our systems.
So we need to go through our local market with our ideas. Some of these people are not in the market.
Yep, okay. In terms of, if you want the local brigade to come and see if you can bring their truck, drive down your driveway, see if you can get around, do that during peacetime. Don't do it during the fire season. We encourage that. We encourage the brigades to take their vehicles out to their local areas, go in the gateways, see if they can manoeuvre around, find out where the static water supplies are, talk to the landholders about setting up systems so that we can get water quickly. So if you've got tanks, we can even provide the fittings to put on the tanks so that they're compatible with our trucks. But talk to your local brigades, yeah.
Now, we are running out of time, so there is time for a couple more questions, but I'm sure that most of us, including the people in the front row, will be happy to hang around afterwards. But I want to go to the lady here closest to me first. Yes, thank you, ma'am.
I live on Buffalo Road, and since the fires, we haven't been able to pick up the local radio stations since Oaks Mountain was out in back in.
So you're on Batley Road, and since fire you haven't had any reception for local radio stations, okay? And we're thinking that's connected to Oaks Road. Yep, and now nothing. I'm the worst person in the world to answer questions about anything technical. But I don't need to be technical to work out something wrong with the Oaks Mountain. Yeah.
Can we get your address afterwards, and we might go and make a visit there and see what's happening?
Yeah, would that be all right? I'll see you afterwards if that's all right. Yeah, okay, thanks. We'll be more than just here, that's for sure. Okay, I'll go with your mate just behind you as the last question, but I'll get to you afterwards if you like. I'll talk to you. Cheers, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Anderson, my name. You mentioned the rural fire service mentioned about fire trial maintenance plan. Now, I was speaking to Nick Myers, who in May of last year. He's the manager of plantation authorisation and audit, and there is he is one of 5 members of his team that has to audit all the forest plantations in the state, and basically his plan is to try and audit each forest plantation once every 3 years. However, he's failing that. He says it's more likely 5 years plus before we can audit them. So, are you, the Rural Fire Service, going to assist in the fire trial maintenance of the fire trials in not only state forests but private forestry? because I think it's been found that the fire trail maintenance is, particularly in forest, in forest, both state forests and private plantations, is not up to scratch. And I do notice since the fires have gone through any plantations that basically their fire trail didn't exist, is suddenly been upgraded or at least graded to try and allow access. That's my first question. My second question is, or it's more a statement, and asking for assistance from the Rural Fire Service. The New South Wales farmers are trying to pressure the state government to have a 50-metre buffer zone around plantations that adjoin neighbours, whether they be grazing or just other country. We, as New South Wales farmers, would like the Rural Fire Service to press the state government to change the legislation, because it's in legislation now that plantation forests can be planted up to boundary fences, which does not allow any access for fire control, weed control at all. So basically, I would think it would be wonderful for neighbours of plantation forestry if the Rural Fire Service would support the New South Wales farmers to get the legislation changed so that a 50-metre minimum barrier would be implemented. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. And I will allow my friends to answer those questions, but the two questions were firstly in relation to fire trail maintenance within forests, and also natural forests and government-owned forest plantations. And I think you guys have heard that question, so I'll allow them to respond to it. The second part was about planting up within 50 metres of boundaries and whether that should be an excluded zone. I understood that, Roger, correctly? Oh, thank you.
So I'll just talk specifically about the fire trail and fire access plan, which is what we call the FACT plan. About 2 years ago, the service actually got a legislative change, and as a result, the fire trail and fire access plan was developed by each bushfire management committee across the state. So Snowy Valleys Council has a bushfire management committee, which all agencies sit on. We've been going through a bit of a process over the last few years, and basically the committee actually decides which trails they want as are fire trails, as a strategic fire trail or a tactical fire trail. It was tenure blind, so they were drawn across a number of areas. So every trail that you see in a forest is not necessarily by definition a fire trail. It may be an access road to the plantation, but not necessarily a designated fire trail. So what John was talking about with the fire trail funding, that specifically targets those trails that we've identified to be a strategic fire trail or a tactical trail, with more weighting on the actual strategic trails. We've had some funding in the past, and we've got some more funding bids in at this stage. That will, the money is becoming available to actually upgrade those trails. So we're actually starting from a very low point, and then starting to get these trails up to a standard, which is a standard 4 metre wide widths and clearing, so our tankers can get up and get them. So that relates to just the fire trail and fire access plans. In terms of the plantation roads, as I said, some of those are physically not a fire trail under the Act, if that makes sense. So, and there's under the Plantation and Forestry Act, and there's probably a few more foresters in the room that might be able to enlighten me, but basically, when a plantation gets harvested and when they replant again, they're required to provide a fire road, depending on the size of the replanting. But basically, any fire road in existing plantation that was established prior to, I think, the Plantation Act of 2001, I think, well, off the top of my head, but basically that road, if it didn't exist prior, they actually had to put a sign up to say no fire road. There may be a road in there or an access road, but it may not necessarily be a fire truck by the definition. So yes, we do work with the Forest Corporation, here Forest Snowy Mountains Forest, in regards to helping them with their fire trials where they can. Obviously, they maintain their own access roads here and there, but certainly any of them that have been identified as strategic or tactical, they have access to the funding we can get to get that trail upgraded to meet the standards. I hope that answers your question.
That's the first part. And the second part, would you consider supporting the New South Wales farmers' effort to have a 50-metre buffer zone around forest plantations? Because currently in the legislation, they can now plant up to your fence. And I've sent photos through to one of the inquiries showing pine trees overhanging the fence.
Yeah, so from my perspective, John is actually our executive officer. He's our representative on the Bushfire Management Committee, on the technical support to the committee. But I'll let John answer that. It's probably from his point.
Yeah. So, absolutely. So a lot of those old forests that have been established were done pre the current legislation, and they were planted up against the boundary fences. There has been a recommendation out of the state inquiry to make sure that there is a buffer zone there. We're working with the softwood industry at the moment to make sure that there is a reasonable buffer zone there. On our Bushfire Management Committee, we have two New South Wales farmers representatives, and one happens to be in the room tonight. He's got his hand raised there, James, thank you. And James is advocating on your behalf to make sure that happens. And I'm sure Chris is here from Humes. They're doing their replanting, and they're certainly not planning up to the boundary fence now. There's a buffer zone, and in many places they're putting a trail and an asset protection zone, and then the softwood. So that, and we've been out and inspected a number of the sites that they've already started to do that. But in terms of the 50 metre, it hasn't been legislated yet, but there is certainly an increased buffer zone over what we've had previously.
So you said reasonable. Do you have an indication of what in metres?
Chris, could you help me out here, mate? 20 metres, is it?
It's on a side-by-side basis, but adjoining without limitations adjoining native farming.
Okay, thank you. That will conclude the questions, but we'll hang around for a yarn if anyone wants to. But before I just do finish up, it's pretty obvious, and look, there'll be no one in the room, whether it's us up here, or the people in the front row, or the people in official roles around the room, that don't acknowledge it was a horrendous time. I think with what's come in the meantime, with the COVID-19 and most recently floods, whilst those things are bad, a secondary bad effect of that is to have pushed this disaster that visited this community across the state, regrettably, to the back of the public consciousness. It's not the back of your consciousness, it's right at the front, and we acknowledge that. And there's still a lot of work to be done, and we need to continue to work to be prepared. And whilst this meeting was never going to be all things to all people, I appreciate everyone coming on and participating. And I will hang around afterwards too. If anyone wants to get me by the ear, please do so, because that's fine. I don't mind doing that at all. I'll hand over to Councillor Julia Hen just to close the night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob, and we're very, very grateful that you'll come and help today. It's been very much appreciated. And I just, following on from what Bob was saying, is thank you to you all being here today. It's still very close to all of us, and here we are today in this hall. We've got Mick Jones up the back. It doesn't seem that long ago that it was pretty dark and scary and smoky outside, and here we are a year later, year and a bit later, and we've been very fortunate with this last season. There hasn't been a fire risk, but we will never take it for granted again. So thank you to John and Peter with your fire preparedness notices. We'll take that on board. Thank you to Tracy down the back, who's got a lot of pamphlets for us, and I think Jennifer, you've got some up there as well. And that's, I encourage people to take all those. We need a plan. We've got it. We'll get a plan. To Chris, thank you for being there online, and we could hear you well. For many of us who are all in black spots, there's a bit of frustration there, and next time you're in town, if you want to come and talk to a group of us, we'd really like to have a further conversation about how we can improve communication throughout the whole area. And and thank you to the people who have made this work. It's pretty incredible that we can do this remotely the way it happens. But and I certainly want to thank Rob, who really kicked some of us in the butt to make this happen tonight, Rob, and for working with me over the last few weeks to make it happen. So thank you very much. And if we could give a clap to